we will leave this edit and remove for later. Let's just focus on the basic functionality. That is, we want to type something to the box and click to add to the bullet point. Now that's going to take some thinking. So first, let me just start the easy way. That's just for the add button. We got to separate every kind of task we have to do here because there's too many things going on. So I want to focus just on the add button because it might be easier to start off that way. And later we will introduce the concept of state to control the input, whatever the user types. So focus on add. So I want to add some initial value to this input just for development. We can remove it later. So I'm going to add a value prop. Remember, React World, we call it prop, not attribute. And let's just have some placeholder like we had, wash the dishes. So you can see the initial value for the input is wash the dishes, just for now, so we can have something already written there. Now let's focus on add. When I click add, I want the text that was typed in this input to be added to this list. Now let's focus. Add is, when I click, it's an event on click. So I gotta go to the button, add a prop called on click, and define its value like this. Now, HTML, you can do this, but the on click is all lowercase. But React World, it has to be camel case. Okay, so after on, make sure the C is capitalized. Now, the syntax for JSX is the equal sign followed by curly braces. It's not the quotes. Now, actually, I put quotes for the other ones because when you have string value for a prop, you can kind of drop the curly braces. So that's actually curly brace there, but I can drop it because it's optional. Okay, but always think there is a curly brace there. That's why I have to add it here. Now, this has to be a function. In the HTML vanilla, it would be just a string with the name of the function and parentheses. But in React World, you got to give just the name of the function, no parentheses. So we're going to say on add click. That's the name I'm going to give to this function. Again, you're free to use whatever name you want. I think it's descriptive to use on add click. Now we got to define this function somewhere, and we're going to do it right before the return value. I'm going to break 2 lines there. Make sure it's within the function, okay? Not outside. So I'm going to create a function on add click here, parentheses, like that. Now, when you click, events in HTML, JavaScript, there's always an event parameter there. But I don't think I care about it right now, so I could have just omitted, or you don't have to use it. But anyway, so when I click add, this function is going to be called. So I want to first access this value here. How can we do that? Now that's the problem. In vanilla HTML, what we would do is, okay, I'm gonna get this input in some sort of way. Like I can use query selector, I can use get element by ID, provided there's an ID attribute added to the input, and so on. But React World, we don't do that. We want to avoid doing that. Please don't do that. React World, we gotta first do the following. We gotta make a variable that will hold the value that the user types. And then we're going to control this input so that React will know every time you type anything, React will, oh, see, hey, you type something, therefore I will react to it and I will update the variable value. And then because the value updated, React will know, hey, something was changed in what we call state. So when the state changes, React will re-render the component. In this case, it will call the function app again. And since the value for what the new thing we typed will be there, it will call it here in the input with that value. Now, enough talk. Let's just get to it. So first, I have to go to the input here. And this value, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to create a variable for that. Now, let's call this, I don't know, to do text. How about that? Now this variable, I gotta go here outside. Now I can't just do to-do text like this because React will not know that you're going to change this. The only way React can know how to change something changed is if it tracks it by placing the variable in the state. This value has to be placed in the state so React can track its value with time. So to do that, we have to call what's called React.useState hook, H-O-O-K. Now, in order to use that, you're going to see there's an error, React is not defined. So we got to go here in the top and say import a React from React. So this means, okay, we're importing the React object from this library React that was installed with npm, the node package manager, for example, or you could use yarn. In any case, when I call React.useState, I'm telling React, hey, I want to keep track of a certain value. And here's the initial value that I pass as the argument. Now, this thing is going to return an array. And it has two things. First is a variable that you can access the value here. In this case, you could access wash the dishes. Let me put in a new line. It would be like this. And then the second value is like a function that we can use to change this value here. Instead of wash the dishes, maybe I want to reset and clear everything and set it to an empty string after I add. Okay. Now, because of this, what people typically do is they destructure this array, meaning they extract the first element of the array into a variable, and then they extract the second element, which is a function, into another variable. Instead of them having to say to do tax sub 1 to access the first element and to do tax sub 1, 0 or 1 to access the second element. Okay, so people like doing this notation with the square brackets, and then you extract each like this. So this is taking, okay, we have an array on the right-hand side. I want to take the first element and set the variable to do tax with that. I want to take the second element and set the variable set to do tax with that. Now, because I know the second variable here is going to be a function, I usually always call it set whatever the name I use for the variable, all in camel case. This is just a naming convention that everybody uses to, just keep things consistent. Okay, and after that, you can see wash the dishes there without an issue. But if I click and try to type anything at all, nothing works. And that's because the value of to-do tax is always fixed. There's no way of changing it. In order to do that, we've got to add a prop to the input that's called onChange. And then you got to do the same approach. Okay, let's add a function here. Let me call on to do tax change. And then I'm going to go outside here, make sure it's either after the add click or before, it doesn't matter, but it has to be within the app function. So let me call it function on to do tax change. By the way, let me enable wrapping here so you can see this better. Editor, word wrap. I want to enable word wrap so we don't have to scroll horizontally. There you go. And I can see on change. Now this function we just defined here, you can do add event like that. Now we're going to use event now because when you type something there, for every character that's typed, it's going to call on to do text change. And you can access the text by saying event.target.value. Well, target is actually the input element, and the input element has a value, remember? And that's how we access what was typed there. Then we can take this and call set to do text with that value. That's the new thing that was just typed. That way, if I go there and try to type it, it's working now. If I refresh, what's going on now? Well, when I type the letter A, it's gonna go here. Okay, you typed A. I'm gonna call the onChange prop of the input, which is on to do text change. Then I'm gonna call the function set to do text, which is used to change the state of the to-do text. And then we're going to take whatever was typed under event, the targeted value, and replace that. And then the moment we change the value of to-do text, that means it's a state change. React, when it sees a state change, will react to it. Hey, state has changed, therefore I must re-render. So it calls app again and returns a new view. Now in this new view will contain to-do text with its new value. Therefore, we see the wash the dishes with the A at the end now, there. And that's how the mechanism works. Very important principle in React that you have to understand. Every time the state changes, a re-render occurs. The component will be re-rendered. How everybody doing so far? Any questions? All right, so let's keep going. Great. But so far we don't have anything to add. So let's go back to the add button. Remember, when I call add, when I click add, it calls on add click. Now that I finally have the value, access to the value that was typed, which is just to-do text variable, right? I can just add that to the to-do list. Now we face another challenge because, okay, the to-do list is just static stuff here. It's just allies. I have no way of injecting that new value here. How am I going to add an ally here? I cannot just hard code it, right? Because it's runtime. So that's why we've got to do some changes here. We have to generate these allies dynamically. We cannot just hard code them here. So what you can do is make an array of to-do strings. So every to-do would just be a string that's placed within an array. So let's go up here. I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call it to-dos. Now it's an array, so square brackets, right? So I'm going to cut do the laundry here. Actually, I'm going to copy that and place it here. I'm going to go back there, take walk the dog, copy, and comma, place it as the second element to this array of to-dos. Notice I have a quote, right? Either double or single, doesn't matter. Now I have a way to store them. Let's create all these allies dynamically using the to-dos variable. So instead of writing them here, I can just map here. So I do to-dos, that's the array of elements that contain every to-do string, dot map, and then I pass a function callback. Okay, I can pass an arrow function here, so I can do parentheses, equal sign, greater than, and then some return value that's implicit. If it's implicit, I don't need to type the curly braces. So I can do li here. Now I need to access every element, so that's the first argument to the callback function. Let's call it just to do. And I can use that here in the li. But if I just say to do here, I'm just going to literally see the word to do. So in order to interpolate or substitute the value of the variable here, I must use curly braces before and after the name. Now you can see do the laundry, the first element, and then walk the dog, the second, all transform or mapped into an ally. Now, this is a very common operation to generate dynamic components based off an array that's passed in with all the data. Right? Map is just an operation that iterates, goes through each element of the array, starting from the first one, and then it will build a new array with whatever values returned from the callback function here. So in this case, it's building a new array with allies containing the to-do from the original. Okay, Now that we have a place to store the to-dos, all we have to do is push, that is, add to the end of this array of to-dos. But again, when you have stuff like this and React must keep track of stuff, right, to react to it and re-render things, you must store this in a state. So we got to do that same pattern, useState hook. So React.useState this array, that's the initial value. And then I must destructure here because two things are returned from an array. So I want to extract them into two separate variables. One is for the access to to-dos, the second to set to-dos, that is, change the value of that state. Now, once I got that, I can use set to-dos to push something to the end of this array of to-dos. So when I click on add click, I'm going to take the to-do text and then I'm going to add to the end of an array that contains the elements for to-dos followed by the to-do text. Now, what I did here is I created a new array and I'm using this operator ... which just means we're going to copy all the elements from the to-dos. And then at the end, I'm going to add the to-do text, which was the thing I typed there. Now we can take this and set as the new value for the to-dos. So I can say set to-dos call with this new array. Now when I click add, you're gonna see it added there. See that? If I click again, keeps adding and adding and adding and adding and adding.